I still remember the way the words echoed across the banquet hall, carried by the microphone, as though the entire world needed to hear them. Even your $1 million savings could not buy you love, Olivia. The sting was not only in the insult, but in the timing. It happened during my cousin's MBA graduation celebration, a moment that was supposed to be filled with pride and family unity. Instead, it became the stage for my humiliation. Jordan, the man I had once trusted with my future, stood there smiling, as though he had delivered some grand truth. Behind him, the projector screen lit up with an email that I had written months earlier, never intended for public eyes. It was a private note where I confessed my fear of losing him. I wrote that I could use part of my inheritance, nearly $2 million locked in an estate outside the city, to help secure our future together. He had kept that email, and now, like a magician pulling a rabbit from his hat, he revealed it in front of my family, our friends, and half of the graduating class. I gripped the small envelope in my hand until the edges cut into my skin. It contained a congratulatory card for my cousin, but at that moment it felt like the only anchor keeping me steady. My parents' faces were pale. My aunt whispered to someone at the table. Laughter rippled uncomfortably among guests who did not know whether to side with me or enjoy the spectacle. I had always thought that betrayal sounded like doors slamming or angry voices, but sometimes betrayal comes quietly dressed in a suit and tie, speaking into a microphone, smiling while stabbing your pride. After the toast, the celebration went on as though nothing had happened. Glasses clinked, waiters carried trays of champagne, and the graduates posed for photos. I sat there invisible, listening to the hollow cheer of a party where no one cared that I had just been stripped bare in public. But what they did not know was that humiliation can ferment into something much stronger than shame. It becomes a fire, slow and controlled, waiting for the right moment to consume everything in its path. I would explain that part later. For now, I will only say this: that night was the last time Jordan ever saw me as weak. Tell me where you are watching from, and make sure to subscribe. We need to talk about families, money, and the strange ways revenge can rewrite a life. Jordan reached out to me only 3 days after the graduation party. I was still nursing the burn of his public humiliation, replaying that cruel sentence in my head every night before sleep. Even your $1 million savings could not buy you love. I expected silence from him, maybe even avoidance. But Jordan had a way of turning shame into charm, as though his behavior was nothing more than a misunderstanding. He called me on a Thursday evening. "Olivia, let's not throw away what we have. We can still be friends," he said, his voice dripping with practiced calm. Friends. That word tasted sour on my tongue. Friends do not expose your secrets on a projector screen at a family celebration. Friends do not reduce your inheritance to a punchline. Yet there he was talking about friendship as though he was offering me a gift. I agreed, but not for the reason he imagined. I agreed because I wanted to see what friendship meant to him, and more importantly, what revenge could mean to me. The following week, Jordan tested this new friendship. He asked if he could still use the credit card we once shared for emergencies. I froze for a moment, then answered, "Friends don't share bank accounts, Jordan." His pause on the other end of the line was delicious. 2 days later, he texted me asking if he could log into my streaming account, the one he used to binge medical dramas after long shifts. "Friends don't share Netflix passwords either," I replied. This time, he did not answer back. I thought that would be the end of it, but Jordan was persistent. He began showing up at our mutual friends' dinners, sliding into the seat next to me, as though nothing had changed. He would laugh at old stories, touch my shoulder lightly, and introduce me as someone who knows me better than anyone else. To the casual listener, it sounded affectionate. To me, it was another way of keeping me tethered to his image. One evening at a birthday party for a mutual friend, he raised his glass and said, "Olivia has always been my emergency contact. Even now, I wouldn't trust anyone else with that role." The table laughed politely, but I looked him straight in the eye and said, "Friends don't list each other as emergencies, Jordan. That role belongs to family, not to broken promises." His smile faltered for the first time. That was when I realized the true nature of his request. Friendship in his vocabulary meant keeping all the benefits of a relationship without any responsibility. He wanted access to my resources, my home, my estate, my loyalty, without offering love or respect in return. He had crafted a perfect arrangement for himself, and he expected me to play along. But I was not going to play along. The next test came on a Saturday morning. I had plans with colleagues for brunch, nothing fancy, just a quiet gathering at a cafe downtown. Jordan texted at 7 in the morning. "Can you bring my gym bag to Marissa's place? I left it at your apartment last month." I stared at the message. My fingers hovered over the screen before I typed back Monday. I'll drop it off at your office. His reply was almost immediate. I need it today. I have plans, I wrote. What plans? He shot back. Friend plans, I answered. That was the end of that conversation, but not the end of his fury. By afternoon, he showed up at the cafe uninvited, his expression caught between charm and anger. He leaned across the table and whispered, "Why are you being distant? This isn't you." I smiled, sipping my coffee slowly. This is exactly me, Jordan. This is what being friends means. His jaw tightened, and I knew I had struck a nerve. The truth about boundaries is simple when you enforce them. People who once took advantage of you will call you cold, distant, even cruel. But boundaries are the lines that separate respect from exploitation. Jordan was learning that lesson, and I was enjoying every second of it. Yet beneath his anger, I sensed a dangerous persistence. He was not going to let go easily, and I knew sooner or later he would try something bigger, something public again. I just had to be ready. And I was. But what he didn't know was that I had already begun gathering evidence. Old text logs, bank transfers, little favors he had asked of others that painted a picture of a man who saw every relationship as a transaction. I kept them neatly organized in a folder on my desk, the edges sharp, the weight heavy with proof. I was not rushing, I was waiting. Because revenge is not about speed, it is about precision. I will tell you how that folder changed everything in the next part. Jordan never liked being denied. That was one thing I had learned over our years together. He was the kind of man who could hear the word no 10 times and still return with a smile, convinced that persistence would turn rejection into compliance. To him, the line between determination and entitlement had long since disappeared. When I began enforcing my boundaries, he grew restless. He called less often, but appeared more in public, weaving himself into every gathering of our shared friend group. It was his way of maintaining control. Remind me that he was still there, still in the room, still the name people mentioned when they looked at me. One Tuesday evening, I returned from work to find a folded note on my kitchen counter. It was written on the back of a restaurant receipt. Stopped by to grab some things. Hope that's okay. The handwriting was his. My heart sank. He had used the spare key he never returned. In my pantry, 2 cans of soup were gone. In the laundry room, a towel was missing. My bathroom still smelled faintly of his cologne. He had showered in my home while I was not there. I called him immediately. Jordan, I need the key back. What, why? His voice was incredulous, as though I had asked him to return a limb. Because friends don't have keys to each other's apartments. That's not how this works. Olivia, don't be ridiculous. We live together. Half of that place feels like mine. It feels like yours, but it isn't. That chapter is over. The silence stretched before he muttered something under his breath and hung up. The next day, I changed the locks. He showed up that evening, pounding on my door, his voice echoing down the hallway. You changed the locks on me. Are you serious? After everything we've shared, I opened the door only wide enough to hand him a box of his things. You said you wanted friendship. This is friendship, Jordan. Friends return each other's belongings. They don't squat in each other's lives. His eyes burned with anger, but behind it was disbelief. For the first time, he was seeing that I meant every word. Still, his attempts to hold power over me did not stop. He began turning to our mutual friends, painting himself as the victim of my coldness. At a dinner party, one of them leaned toward me and whispered, Jordan says you've been unfair. He just wants to stay close. I smiled politely but said nothing. Truth has a way of revealing itself without my help. Then came the night of betrayal. Our group had organized a game night at an apartment downtown. I arrived early carrying a bottle of wine. The room filled with laughter and chatter until Jordan walked in with a woman I recognized instantly. Marissa, my closest confidant from graduate school. She had once sworn she would never cross certain lines. But there she was, her hand tucked into the crook of his arm, her smile wide and defiant. This is Marissa, Jordan announced loudly, his eyes darting toward me. We met at yoga. She's been amazing. The words were staged a performance designed for me. The entire room turned to gauge my reaction. I forced a smile, walked over, and extended my hand. Welcome, Marissa. I hope you enjoy game night. Her eyes flickered, searching for anger or tears, but I offered her none. Inside, though, I felt the cut deep. Betrayal rarely comes from enemies. It comes from the people you once trusted to guard your heart. I sat quietly through the evening, moving my pieces across the board, laughing at jokes, sipping my wine. Outwardly calm, inwardly raging. Every betrayal has a tipping point, and this was mine. Later that night, alone in my apartment, I opened the folder on my desk. Inside were printouts of text messages, bank transfers, and screenshots. Jordan had been soliciting money from more than one person, asking for small loans, promising to pay them back once his residency was complete. He had taken advantage of friends, colleagues, even distant relatives. The irony was bitter. The man who mocked me for relying on an inheritance had been quietly borrowing from everyone around him. I added the evening's betrayal to the file, a note that read, "Public appearance with Marissa's staged introduction." This folder was no longer just evidence. It was a weapon, and in my hands it was becoming sharper every day. But what they didn't know was that I had no intention of keeping this war private. Jordan had humiliated me in public once. He had betrayed me in public again. The stage for revenge would also be public, larger and louder. And soon everyone would see him for who he truly was. I chose my aunt's brownstone for the battleground. Not the internet, not a courthouse, not a hospital hallway where whispers stick like gum to the floor. A living room is where family history is written in small stains and framed smiles. It is where people say unforgivable things while pretending they are only joking. My aunt turned 60 that night. She wore a navy dress and a paper crown. Candles waited on a lemon cake that had survived the subway ride better than most secrets survive time. I arrived early with tulips and a quiet mind. In my tote were two objects, a slim black tablet and the folder I had been building thick, now the paper warm from my hand. Jordan came late. He preferred entrances to arrivals. He stepped through the door with a grin and a coat thrown over one shoulder. On his arm was Marissa, my old study partner, now polished into a guest with a right to be there. Her bracelet chimed against the glass when she waved. She looked at me only long enough to confirm I had seen her. People who choose betrayal want witnesses. Without an audience, treachery feels like an unfinished sentence. He crossed the room, air parted politely. "Olivia," he said, it still sounded like a line from a long play. "You look well." "So do you," I answered. Then I turned to greet my aunt to set down the tulips to help place extra plates at the end of the table, where cousins always appear as if multiplied. I did not ask where he had found his courage. I already knew humiliating someone once is a kind of drug. Some people keep chasing the high. Dinner started with toasts. My uncle thanked everyone for coming. My cousins clinked glasses and mentioned old family jokes that are not funny outside the bloodline. Jordan lifted his glass too, a residency badge still clipped to his inner pocket, like a medal he had not removed after the parade. "To second chances," he announced, and there was that smile again, so gentle you might miss the hook beneath it. Marissa squeezed his arm. The room murmured approval because kindness, even counterfeit, is pleasant to watch. I took a sip of water and looked at the wall clock. I was counting breath and minute letting the night ripen. Revenge is best served when the other person thinks dinner is over. There is a habit older people have when they tell stories on the radio. They mark the little objects that made the moment real. Matchbook receipt a smudge on the rim of a glass. I will do the same now, not for flair, but for truth. On the buffet beside the lemon cake sat a little tin of matches from a restaurant in the village. My aunt collects them. A folded napkin had the shape of a boat. My cousin's child kept poking it, sailing it silently toward the candles. These are the frames of the evening, the proof that this happened in a room where good people meant well and still managed to hurt one another. Jordan did not wait long to test his lines. He moved through conversations like a man checking windows, seeing which ones might open. He stood beside me at the sink while I rinsed grapes. "I left a few things at your place," he said, casual as news about the weather. "Thought I'd swing by this week." "You returned your key," I said, "and friends set times, they do not swing by." He smiled as if indulging a child's stubbornness. "We have always been more than friends live." "We are exactly what you asked us to be," I said. Then I dried my hands and walked away. A few relatives glanced up. They heard the tone, if not the words. Later, when the cake was cut and the paper crown had slipped into a crooked halo on my aunt's hair, Jordan raised his voice just enough. "I am glad we can all be adults," he declared to our table. "Olivia and I, we understand one another. No hard feelings, just history." Marissa laughed softly. A few people sighed with relief. Peace is a tempting lie. It saves dishwashing time, it keeps the evening light. I let the moment breathe, then I reached into my tote and felt the edge of the folder. I did not pull it out. Not yet. He came for a final pass, a small show before the finale. "Marissa's been amazing," he announced to the cluster of friends near the stereo. "Supportive, thoughtful. not transactional the way some relationships become. He kept his eyes on me while he said it like a surgeon glancing at a monitor during a risky cut. He wanted to see if I would bleed. I smiled. I lifted my glass. To support, I said. May it never be billed hourly. A few laughs, a few tight throats. He blinked. It is hard to argue with a line that looks like a compliment on the surface. I stepped into the hallway and texted my aunt's son. He is the family's pragmatic soul, good with wires and adapters and the small technologies that tame chaos. When everyone is in the living room, can you mirror my tablet to the television? I added a heart. He sent back a thumbs up and a question mark. I told him it was a slideshow for the birthday. That was not a lie. There are many kinds of birthdays. Back in the living room, the lights dimmed for the tradition photo reel and song. My cousin fiddled with the remote. The television flashed to a screensaver, then to a tidy row of files. I stood near the mantel, not center stage. I wanted the room, not the spotlight. The first pictures appeared: my aunt on a beach, my aunt in a thrifted coat during the snowstorm years, my aunt holding a pie like a firstborn. People cooed. People remembered. Nostalgia is a soft rug. You can tuck anything under it if you lift it carefully. When the applause settled, my cousin glanced at me. I nodded. The second file opened. On the screen appeared a screenshot of a text conversation, names redacted to initials, dates, visible amounts, spelled out in words the way a check does when the bank insists. Jordan's number at the top, a string of messages requesting small loans for this and that licensing fees exam course, a security deposit he swore he would reimburse by the end of the month. The tone was uniform, urgent, then grateful, then absent. The amounts were modest alone, 200 here, 300 there, but they formed a choir when read together. Someone near the couch said, "Oh, the way a person does when a puzzle piece slides into place." Jordan stepped forward, palms lifted. "This is out of context," he said. "Private," he said, private as though the word could cancel light. Another slide. A bank transfer list from a different friend, the entries neat and relentless. A note line that read covering until residency stipend. Another that said promise to repay by spring. The column of outflow looked like a thin waterfall. The dates suddenly close, suddenly many. Then, a third slide: messages, between Jordan and a colleague, who was not a patient, but who had been treated like one. The compassion in her sentences transformed into a small ledger of favors. "I do not understand what this is," Marissa said. Her bracelet no longer chimed. Her hand had gone still. "It is a pattern," I answered, my voice steady. My hands did not shake. "A pattern you are welcome to deny, Jordan, but not to erase." He turned toward me, his charm gathering like a shield. "Olivia, you are hurt. You have been hurt since the graduation. We all saw it. This is not you." "This is exactly me," I said. "This is the friend you asked me to be. The kind who tells the truth when a polite lie would be easier." He reached for the remote. My cousin, loyal to blood and to better stories, set it behind him. Another slide appeared. A group chat where Jordan had joked about investors, little laugh faces lined up like clowns at the edge of a dark tent. The faces in the room changed. Affection drains quickly when arithmetic steps in. Auntie, bless her, spoke first. "Is this why you shamed our girl at graduation?" she asked, soft but unarguable. "To hide your own shame?" Jordan shook his head. He tried to smile. He said the words men say when the ground tilts, misunderstanding, jealousy taken out of context. I let him finish. Then I lifted the tablet and showed the last piece, not to punish, but to close the loop. It was a short screen recording of my email, the one he had projected during the graduation speech. The camera panned from the line about my fear of losing him to the paragraph where I declined to touch the inheritance at all. The sentence stood there like a lighthouse. "I will not spend the estate. We must stand on work, not windfalls." He had cropped that part before using it against me. Now the missing half returned. Silence arrived, not the awkward kind, but the heavy kind that tells you a season has ended. "I did not see that line," Marissa murmured almost to herself. "I imagine you did not," I said. "Selective vision is a popular hobby." Jordan stepped closer. He lowered his voice as if whispers could unprint documents. "What do you want, live-in apology?" "Fine. I am sorry." I set the tablet on the mantel and finally pulled the folder from my tote. I did not open it. Its weight did the speaking. "What I want is simple," I said. "No more keys, no more passwords. No more borrowed faces in our friend group to make me seem unkind when I am only clear. You asked for friendship. Here is the boundary. Stay on your side of it." The room exhaled. People looked away not from discomfort, but from relief. Truth once said plainly, freeze bystanders too. My aunt adjusted her paper crown. "It is my birthday," she declared. "I want cake and no more speeches." The laughter that followed was clean, almost grateful. Plates were passed. Frosting found its way to napkins. Someone restarted the playlist, and this time the song matched the room. Jordan tried to salvage something Goodnights offered with a brittle cheer, a hand at Marissa's back, guiding her toward the door. She did not lean into him. If betrayal needs witnesses, so does retreat. Both are lonely acts. At the threshold, he turned. "You did this to humiliate me," he said. "No," I answered. "You did that at graduation." "I did this to balance the ledger." I held his gaze. "And to warn you." "Warn me." His scoff wanted company and did not get it. "That what you call charm is a debt you never intended to pay," I said. "People are starting to read the bill." He left. The door closed with the gentle click of a scene change. I returned to the table. My aunt cut an extra slice for me, thin as a ribbon. "You all right?" she asked. "I am," I said, and it was true. Not triumphant, not giddy. Calm the way a room feels after someone opens a window. But what they did not know was that the window was only the first move. Air must shift before a storm breaks. I had other weather in me, and I knew where to let it fall. I used to believe silence could protect me, that if I ignored their whispers and laughter long enough, the storm would pass. But storms do not pass when people feed them. They grow. It was during a holiday dinner in the middle of December when the final blow came. The house was decorated in silver garlands, the dining table stretched with fine china and crystal. I had brought a bottle of wine from a vineyard in California, thinking at least the evening could remain civil. I was wrong. "Olivia," my cousin's voice cut through the room, sharp as glass. "You can't even hold on to your $1 million inheritance without begging for love. Imagine wasting money just to be noticed." The room erupted in forced laughter. I felt every eye settle on me, their grins wide, their pity sharper than knives. I pressed my hand against the folder in my lap, the folder that held my aunt's will, my proof of worth, my reminder that I was not empty-handed. But at that moment, paper felt thinner than air. They passed plates of turkey and cranberry sauce, as if humiliation were part of the meal. Someone raised a phone, snapping pictures, and within minutes I saw it, a social post flashing across the table. My cousin had typed, "Imagine having millions and still being unwanted. Cheers to Olivia." By dessert, hundreds had reacted, laughing emojis spilling across the screen. I wanted to scream, to stand on the table and tear the whole charade apart. But instead I stayed still, silent, because what they didn't know was that I had already prepared my move. 3 weeks earlier, my attorney had confirmed something no one else at that table understood. The estate I inherited was not just worth $2 million. It included controlling shares in a family-owned business my relatives thought belonged solely to them. While they mocked me, they were sitting at my mercy. The humiliation that night did not crush me, it crystallized me. I excused myself, left my untouched plate on the table, and drove home in silence. The streets glowed with Christmas lights, but I saw only the reflection of my own clenched hands on the steering wheel. At home, I unlocked the small safe by my desk and took out the deed, the stamped documents, and the sealed envelope my aunt had given me before she died. She had whispered, "Use this when the time is right." Until now, I had not understood her meaning. The right time was here. I drafted an email that night attaching scanned copies of the documents. The subject line read, "Control has shifted." My attorney advised me to wait, but patience had bled out of me at that dinner table. I hit send. By morning, the message had spread through the family like fire on dry grass. The company that fed their pride, their status, their wealth, it was mine now. Their texts poured in, some pleading, some furious. My phone buzzed with insults I will not repeat, but one line from my uncle still rings clear. "You'll regret crossing blood." But blood had already crossed me. The humiliation of that night had birthed a new version of me, one who would not bow, not beg, not sit quietly at the table while being treated as less than human. This was no longer about being accepted. It was about making sure every laugh, every sneer, every viral post had a cost, and I was ready to collect. Tell me if you were in my place. Would you forgive, or would you burn everything down? Comment below, because this story is only halfway told. When the first wave of phone calls slowed, I sat at my desk, fingers resting lightly on the folder that had become my weapon. It was strange how quiet the apartment felt, the hum of the refrigerator louder than the fury I had unleashed hours earlier. I half expected someone to pound on my door, demand I explain myself. But the only sound was the soft ticking of the wall clock. People imagine revenge as a scream, a dramatic explosion. In truth, it begins with silence, the kind of silence that unsettles, that makes people realize the ground beneath them has shifted. The family business had always been their shield, their excuse for arrogance. They paraded its success like a crown, using it to measure who was worthy of respect at the table. But my aunt, clever to the end, had seen through their cruelty. Her shares had been quietly transferred to me, buried in the language of her will, hidden behind a notary stamp no one bothered to examine. Now every decision, every paycheck, every client contract passed through me. They did not just mock the woman with the estate, they mocked the chairwoman of their own survival. The first meeting I called was not in a boardroom. It was streamed online, a quiet announcement from my study. I wore a plain black sweater, hair tied back, no jewelry, no performance. The video went live at 8 o'clock in the morning. Good morning, I began, my voice steady. As of last week, controlling shares of the family company were transferred to me in accordance with my late aunt's will. Effective immediately, I will be implementing a financial audit of all accounts. Transparency is not optional, it is mandatory. The chat box lit up with stunned questions. Employees, shareholders, even family members who had joined under fake usernames scrambled to understand what had just happened. Within an hour, the video had been clipped, reposted, and viewed more than 1 million times. My face, calm, uncompromising, was plastered across feeds with captions like, "She flipped the script." Jordan texted me mid-broadcast, "Stop this. You'll ruin everything. We can talk privately." I let the message sit unanswered. Some conversations are not worth having. By afternoon, I received my first call from a news outlet, then another. They wanted to know the story how the woman mocked at a graduation, shamed at family dinners, had turned the tables overnight. I gave them nothing more than a sentence, "Boundaries matter even in business." It was enough. That single phrase began trending. People across the country latched onto it, reshaping it into memes, hashtags, even slogans for self-help podcasts. Meanwhile, the backlash within my family was ferocious. My cousin posted a furious rant online, claiming I had manipulated my aunt in her final days. He forgot that digital trails tell the truth. The very next day, old photos surfaced of him bragging about vacations paid for with company funds. The hypocrisy was too delicious for the internet to ignore. Jordan, always the charmer, tried to distance himself. He went on a local radio program describing me as emotional and vindictive. Within hours, listeners dug up his graduation stunt, replaying his cruel words on loop. Even your $1 million savings couldn't buy you love. Sponsors began reconsidering his residency placement. Hospitals do not like scandal. I had not lifted a finger to spread those clips. The public did it for me. Revenge, I realized, was not just personal, it was viral. But what they did not know was that my plan went deeper still. The estate, the shares, the documents, these were not the end. They were only the stage. From the moment Jordan humiliated me on that projector screen, I had been preparing not just to defend myself, but to redefine myself. The woman they laughed at would become the woman who set the standard. My estate was no longer just a house in the suburbs. It was becoming a hub for content, for community, for teaching others how to guard their boundaries against family who mistook generosity for weakness. I hired a small production team paid for out of my savings, not the company's. We set up cameras in the grand library of the estate. Each week I spoke plainly about betrayal, about inheritance, about the strange cruelty that often hides inside family celebrations. My first video ended with me holding up the folder that had once made my hands tremble. This is proof, I said, that humiliation can be rewritten, that betrayal can be balanced, and that revenge, when done with precision, is not destruction, it is justice. The video passed 5 million views in 3 days. Jordan called again this time, not with anger but desperation. "You've made your point. Can we end this quietly, please?" I stared at his name glowing on my phone. For years he had spoken as though I were an option, a placeholder, someone to lean on until better came along. Now his voice trembled. I did not answer. Instead, I walked outside into the cold night, the estate lit with soft golden lamps. The silence felt different now. It was no longer the silence of shame. It was the silence of control. And yet deep inside, I knew the story was not finished. Because revenge is never a single act. it is a chain. And the next link was already waiting. There is a point in every storm when the thunder quiets, when the rain does not stop, but begins to soften, and you realize you have survived the worst of it. That was where I found myself in the weeks after my broadcast, after the viral clips and the public collapse of the family's carefully built image. The estate felt different now. It was no longer a place where I hid from humiliation. It was a stage where I told the truth. The grand library smelled of oak and old paper, but it also carried the faint hum of cameras and lights. I had turned it into a studio, yet it still held the comfort of my aunt's presence, her books, her portraits, her unspoken reminder that I was never meant to shrink myself for others. For the first time in years, I began walking the grounds with peace instead of restlessness. I noticed the frost on the hedges, the slow melt of ice across the stone steps. Evenings were no longer filled with replaying Jordan's voice in my head. Instead, I wrote, I read, I prepared. My revenge had been sharp, but what remained was clarity. Some family members cut ties completely, their silence, a relief. Others sent cautious messages, trying to smooth over what had happened. It was just a joke, one cousin wrote. Another added, you know how family can be. I read them, closed my phone, and chose not to respond. Forgiveness may come one day, but reconciliation requires respect, and that was still absent. Jordan, of course, was louder. His messages alternated between pleading and threatening. You've ruined me, he wrote one night. Hours later, another came. We can fix this if you'll just meet me. The desperation in his tone was a reversal so sharp it almost made me pity him. Almost. But what they didn't know was that I had already chosen closure, and closure does not always require confrontation. I changed my number. I blocked the accounts that spread poison. I gave my lawyer instructions to handle any further disputes with the company. And then I did the simplest, most radical thing of all. I moved forward. With the estate secure and the business in transition, I began using my platform for more than my own story. People reached out, strangers from across the country, sharing their own tales of betrayal at dinner tables, at weddings, at funerals. They wrote about siblings who claimed houses, parents who drained savings, in-laws who treated generosity as weakness. Each message reminded me that my story was not unique. It was part of a larger pattern of cruelty wrapped in family ties. So I invited them in. I created a forum, a space where voices long silenced could speak. It grew faster than I expected. Thousands, then tens of thousands, joining to tell their stories. The estate was no longer just mine. It had become a hub of resilience. And in those voices, I found healing. My aunt's portrait hung above the fireplace. One evening, I stood before it with the folder in my hand, the same folder that once burned my palms with shame. I opened it slowly, reading through the deeds, the stamped signatures, the proof of what was mine. Then with steady breath, I placed it back into the safe. It no longer needed to sit on my desk as a weapon. The battle was finished. Closure did not mean forgetting. It meant choosing to live without carrying their laughter in my pocket. At my next gathering this time, one I hosted at the estate, I invited only those who had stood by me quietly, the friends who had listened instead of mocked, the relatives who had chosen respect over gossip. The table was smaller, the meal simpler, but the air was lighter. No one sneered, no one reached for their phone to turn a person into a punchline. When we raised our glasses, it was not to flaunt power, but to honor peace. That night, after the last guest left, I stood by the window looking out over the grounds. The lamps cast soft circles of light on the lawn, and in the distance the old gates stood closed, guarding not just property, but my boundaries. I thought of the graduation party, the humiliation, the cruel words projected for everyone to see. They no longer pierced me. They had become the soil from which something stronger grew. And I realized perhaps for the first time that revenge had never been about destruction. It had been about revelation, about forcing masks to fall, about showing who truly stood with me and who never had. If you are listening to this, if you have ever sat at a table where your name was used as a weapon, know this: you are not powerless. Boundaries are not cruelty, they are clarity. And sometimes the sweetest revenge is not in burning bridges, but in building gates that only open to respect. Tell me, do you think I chose the right ending? If you believe closure was enough, comment right. If you would have gone further, share your idea below. I once thought revenge would taste like fire, that it would scorch the tongue and leave nothing behind but ashes. What I learned standing in the quiet halls of my estate is that true revenge tastes like still water. It calms, it reflects, and it carries you forward without bitterness. Months had passed since the night Jordan projected my words onto a screen, since cousins and uncles turned my inheritance into their favorite punchline. In those months, I did not just reclaim what was mine, I redefined what it meant to belong to myself. The estate with its high windows and oak staircases had been a symbol of loneliness at first. I used to walk the corridors hearing only the echo of laughter that wasn't there, but now the house breathed differently. The walls carried stories my own, and those shared by strangers who found me online. I had opened my doors not to those who mocked me, but to those who needed a place where their wounds could be spoken aloud. One evening, I sat at the long dining table with a group of women and men I had never met before that year. They were teachers, engineers, retirees, all of them with stories that mirrored mine in shape, if not in detail. A brother who demanded a house, parents who copied keys to a lake property, a sister who mocked her sibling at dinner. Their voices filled the room like music, each one proof that betrayal is common, but so is resilience. We shared a meal. We laughed not the cruel laughter I remembered from that holiday dinner, but laughter that softened, that healed. For the first time, I realized the estate was not just my inheritance, it was my aunt's final lesson. She had not left me wealth to buy affection or silence. She had left me power to create something new. Jordan faded into the background of my life. I do not know where he is now, and truthfully, I no longer care. The family business runs without him. My cousins still grumble online, but their words fall flat without the empire they once claimed. Their sneers are echoes, nothing more. I walked the garden one morning as spring arrived, watching the frost retreat from the roses. I thought of the younger version of myself, the one who trembled under their mockery, who clutched an envelope at a graduation and felt invisible. I wanted to reach back through time and tell her, "You will not only survive this, you will rise from it." And maybe that is the true essence of revenge, not destruction, not cruelty, but transformation. To take what was meant to break you and build something unshakable. I will close my story with, this family can wound more deeply than any stranger. But if you hold your boundaries, if you guard your dignity, you will find that no insult, no viral post, no betrayal can erase your worth. So now I turn to you. If you believe I chose the right path, firm boundaries, quiet strength, revenge delivered, not in anger, but in clarity, then comment right below. If you think you would have done it differently, if you would have burned every bridge to the ground, then share your idea. Because this is not just my story, it is the story of anyone who has ever been humiliated, betrayed, and forced to choose between silence and action. Which path would you choose?